Okay, now that we've completed our first bar graph, the 10 most popular breeds, we're ready to move on to the next one. The next one is 12 states with most registered cats and dogs. So what we have here is another bar graph. It's the same style and format as the previous one. Supplementally, to further illustrate the numbers in the graph, we have a map which corresponds to the states that are in the graph. So since we're showing the top 12 states with the most registered cats and dogs, those are the states that are colored. And there's a key here that shows what the colors mean. So the most registered cats are in pink, the most registered dogs are in purple, and then both cats and dogs are in a combination of the pink and the purple, in a blend of the pink and the purple. So what we can tell from the map is that most of the top 12 states of registered cats and dogs overlap. For example, New York is number 4 for dogs and number 2 for cats. So what the graph is telling us is that the top 12 states for cats and dogs are almost the same with a couple exceptions. All right, so looking at this finished infograph, notice that all of the bar graphs are proportional with each other. So each one of these could stand on their own outside of the context of this entire infographic. We could just take this single graph and we could learn something from it. But since it's part of a larger whole, they should all work together and be comparable with each other. So the bar down here that represents 6 percentage points is the same length as the bar in this graph, which also represents 6 percentage points. The bar in this graph that represents 8 percentage points is the same length as the bar that represents 8 percentage points down here. So these aren't just randomly sized, but their size allows us to visually compare all of these different statistics with each other. So that's really important. Going back to our document, I've already started on this graph. I also made a few changes to the most popular breeds graph, just in terms of the size of the text and sizing and placement of these cat and dog images. I did adjust the size of this text down here to 12 point with 18 point leading, and this text is 12 point with 21 point leading. I've already sized and positioned my cat bars for the next graph so that they are correct. So if we go back to this other graph, you can see that the center point of this graph aligns with the center point of the graph below it, and the graph below it centers in its box. So again, what I'm trying to do is to find ways to align the elements of this graphic in order to make it appear organized and so that it's easy to read and it looks visually pleasing. So I did create guidelines that align with the center of this lower section down here in order to find the correct distance of this middle area, the separation between the two bars. I drew and I zoomed in when I did this, so I was a little bit more careful than I'm showing you now, but I drew a little box there, and I placed that on the center point of my previous guideline, and then I created 2 guidelines that would align with that edge, so I can keep the distance between my 2 bar graphs consistent. I did the same thing to find the distance from the bottom of the lower bar to the border below it. I drew a box up here which served as a measurement, and then I dragged it down here and I adjusted the distance. So this is correctly sized and placed. The way I got these bars to be the correct size is that I created my new bar graph and I moved it on top of the old one, and where there's a bar on this new graph that represents 6 percentage points, I overlaid it on the bar of the old graph that represents 6 percentage points, and then I just sized it to be the same dimensions. I'll demo how I did this by creating the dog bar graph. So I'm just creating it in the exact same way that I did the previous graphs that I've already demoed. Okay, and I need to hit Shift-Command-G to ungroup this and make these objects editable. I want to get rid of everything except the bars. That's the only thing that I need. I'm going to ungroup and let's say ungroup. It takes a few ungroups to ungroup these bars, but we need them to be individually editable. And we know that these are going to be 20 pixels wide because that's what our other bars are. We want to keep things consistent. So I just need to go in here and change each one to 20 pixels wide. Okay, so we want our bar representing 6 percentage points, which is right here, to be the same size as this bar up here representing 6 percentage points, because again, we want these to be all comparable with each other. So I'm going to first rotate this and reflect, and then drag this up to my 6 percentage point bar. All right, so I have my 6 percentage point bar overlapping the previous one, and I'm just going to take the entire group and drag so that these sizes match. So if I drag the entire group, that means the entire group size is proportionally with the one that I'm referencing. And that's really important. We want all of the bar graphs to be proportional with each other. All right, and then the other thing is we want these to be spaced the same. So I'm going to do that also just by comparing it with the old bar graph. I'm just using that as a template. And this does take a little bit of time, but it's worth it. If you want your design to look professional, it needs to have this sort of consistency and attention to detail. Where my new graph is longer than the old one, I can just create some little rectangles that will help me to space these evenly. All right, then we want to grab all of our bars, group them together, drag them down into position. Maybe it's a good idea to drag a guideline here so that we can be consistent. All right, we can apply our colors. Again, we want to be consistent with the use of our colors, so pink is cat and purple is dog. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off this graph in the same way that I did the previous one, what we can do here is we can just and we'll ungroup so that we can grab these individual objects. I can use what I've figured out previously. I don't have to do everything from scratch. And on this I just need to add a couple numbers. I want to adjust the kerning on these double-digit numbers. All right, on this one I've got a stroke which I want to remove. For this graph we're going to borrow our styles from above, but we're going to and actually I never did it. I need to drag a text box. All right. Since I didn't create a text box for the original titles, they distort when I try to resize the text area. All right, so we want to maintain consistency in spacing. So again, I'm just using my little technique. I'm not going to say this is the absolute best way to do this, but it's an easy, kind of a quick way I've found in order to space things in Illustrator. All right, so we can copy and paste from our Word document, but I'm just going to type in the new title. Just make sure that you check your spelling. All right, and I'm centering this. I'm making sure that this is centered in this space by dragging the text box to the guidelines, and that will automatically center this as long as my text is aligned center. And it's the same for this, but I'm going to center this right over the bar graph. And I'm using my center guideline and the node. I'm just going to make sure that's centered right on that node, right on that guideline. And I can, be pretty precise here if I zoom in. All right. Then we can just borrow our styles from the previous graph. What we can do is just copy these percentages, copy our style for the percentages. We can copy our style for the, let me copy a single line one. Copy our style for our names, and then just position all these. Change the numbers to match the info, and make sure that these are centered and they're positioned in a consistent way so that they match the style above it, or the positioning and spacing above it. We want these all to look like they came from the same place. They all are part of the same graphic. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this, and I'll be back later.